Hey everybody, welcome to The Higher State, where we talk about all things related to cannabis. Today is a little different. We're just going to talk about opioids, narcotics, legalization or decriminalization of narcotics and opioids that happen in British Columbia. There's been some really awesome questions, and I wanted to field your questions around this today. Can you guys hear me okay? That's the first thing I want to know. Can people hear me? Because we have...
I just asked that question too.
Oh, because we in the background here, I feel like I'm on Mr. Rogers, like, whatever, sitting here, or like Santa. Be like, hey, I don't have a fire today. And Lee's not here, but we're at Lee's place, so whatever. So yeah, can people hear me? All right, that's cool. So the questions that people have asked, well, first I'll tell you my perspective. I kind of spoke about it a little bit yesterday. I think it's great. It's a great start to decriminalize possession of a small quantity of pretty much all drugs when it comes to the province of British Columbia. I think we should be doing it in Canada. I think Toronto is on its way to doing it as well. There are different countries that have already done this, and we have a path forward. Portugal's done it, Netherlands has done it, Denmark's done it. There's many countries that have done it in the past. Specifically, the first one to do it was Portugal. And that's because, why I like it, why I think it's a good, it's good, is, well, we just have to look at the countries that have really strict laws and see the outcomes there, right? What are the outcomes we're looking for? Usually we look at, violence. We look at hardline drug use. We look at employment rates. We look at broken families. We look at addiction. We look at mental health. And I don't think addiction belongs in our legal system, in jail. Addiction doesn't belong in jail. Addiction belongs in the mental health realm. And the ways we can go about dealing with it is through our healthcare system.
What are the proposed laws exactly?
Of what?
The BC, like which drugs are...
Yeah, so targeting? Opioids in particular, narcotics in particular, fentanyl, and there's a couple other drugs in there, but I'm talking specifically about opioids today, and you can carry up to like 2 grams or 3 grams of fentanyl on you. Okay. And this is for personal use. There is a difference. We have to understand there's a difference between personal use and the intent to traffic. Those laws are not changing. Violent laws violence because of drug use is not changing. Those laws don't change. The only thing that changes, if you are found in the possession of a certain quantity of a Schedule I drug, in this case, let's say fentanyl, you're not going to be arrested for it. And I'll tell you, we have a lot of really good data from other countries to show the effects, the positive effects. First of all, hardline drug use. What happens? Hardline drug use, usually if we take a percentage of the population that uses hardline drugs, it's around 4 to 6% of any population. Usually 4% is the number that's given. If we look at Portugal, for example, or even at the Netherlands, pretty much any of them, their hardline drug use drops to nearly 1%. So hardline drug use on its own decreases. Violence, there was a good study, I actually just posted it. The study done in 2010, this is not new information. The study the study conducted at UBC in 2010, it was a systematic review, so it's fairly robust, looking at police involvement and its effect on its effect on violence or gang drug-related violence. And contrary to what we normally believe in, which is a lot of your concerns, when the more police involvement or the more law enforcement is involved with drug law, the higher incidence of violence there are. On the flip side, the more lax one's country's laws are around drug use, the less violence there is around drug use and in violence in general. Those incidents go down. That's just fact. So Yes, people have been asking me a question like, well, if we legalize it and it's just a free-for-all, violence rates are going to go up. That's not true. It's actually the opposite of that.
I think if you look at the Switzerland model too, where they did the similar thing, and they're like a more conservative society, so it wasn't their gut reaction to go like, we're going to be tolerant for everybody. They went with what actually worked, and they decriminalized, but they also put the money right back into counseling. Was like a big part of it.
They've all done that. So the question there are two different questions that we're asking here, right? So if we decriminalize it, then what? Are we saying it's a free for all? No. The cost on our system to stick people in jail is astronomical. Yeah. This all started basically in the 80s, right? With Ronald Reagan and his war on drugs. And remember watching the crack is whack commercials? And this is your brain and this is your brain on drugs. And you would see like the fucking fried egg and all this crazy shit. And but you have to also understand what was the underlying what was the intention of the war on drugs? Was the intention of
the war on the black community?
That's right. It was war on black community. It was a race politics, and also self-interest. Right,
because war on something.
It was definitely not a war on drugs. It was a war on people, and it was a war on people's pockets. Because the people that made money from this were the institutionalization or incarceration of young black men and people of poor minorities. And also the people that made money were these, the institutions that put them in prison.
The rise of the industrial complex.
It was definitely the rise of the industrial complex, and it outlawed. I mean, I bring it all back to cannabis as well. This was a major reason why cannabis was outlawed in the first place, because of race politics and because of greed. You had big pharma coming around. You wanted to regulate it. You wanted them to make the money, so you had to demonize a certain population, and that's kind of what happened. Drugs weren't notoriously outlawed, and we didn't have the problem that we have today.
Yeah, we forget that. If you look back even 100 years, the relationship that society had towards drugs is completely different than it is, more our parents' generation. I feel like it's changed, but I feel like we used to view drugs as a useful tool that we could use as in society, and now it's like, I don't know. We've kind of... It reminds me of drinking culture.
I don't think people can hear you on that live.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
It reminds me of drinking culture too, though, because like in North America, people grow up with binge culture drinking.
Yeah.
And if you go to Europe, it's much more integrated into like just normal life. And I feel like we kind of treat drugs the same way in a lot of ways here in North America.
You raise a good point. So, what's interesting? Do you remember you may not remember this, being 15 years old and getting really drunk? So I'm Jewish, and we have these Jewish holidays, and alcohol is sort of, it's not ingrained in your culture, but it's part of the culture. Most of the time when we, anytime you do a prayer on like Fridays or whatever, there's always a libation. Wine is always involved. Go to synagogue, you have, the Scotch. The reason I went to synagogue is because we had a Scotch club in the back. So like people are, praying and we're out in the back drinking Scotch.
You had the same thing with wine. Yeah.
Yeah. And so one time, I mean, certainly obviously you've got to be of age or whatever, but everybody was underage drinking, and you're 15, 16 years old, and your friends are walking down the street on a Jewish holiday because you can't drive if you're Orthodox, like smashed, like totally drunk, passes out on like somebody's lawn, and the police pick him up. And so he now is getting charged with whatever underage drinking and all this other stuff. But he got off for religious purposes. That's how we got out. Was the argument. He had a lawyer, and the lawyer's like, for religious purposes, you could do all these things.
That's what we just got off because it was a small town. But yeah, I feel like that's one thing that like we shouldn't charge kids for stuff like that either. There's like, what's the upset to?
Yeah.
That comes back to the drug argument too, though. It's like there's no positive for us really charging people with small drug offenses, right?
Right. No.
If you look at
what is it? Charging people with small drug offenses puts such a burden on not just...
And it creates career criminals.
Society, they're paying for it. The family is broken. The job isn't there anymore. What if they're a one-income family? Now that's gone. That opportunity is gone. You've ruined children. And what have you done for the underlying cause of addiction?
Yeah.
Nothing, zero. So
You probably made it worse.
you have made it worse. So people go to prison. Like, listen, I work in a hospital, and we work near it's not jail. It's like, you know, on your way to jail, whatever. It's it's prison,
holding?
whatever it is. It's holding, yeah. And so
Shows
or
how
maybe
hip you
Barton,
are.
maybe it is a jail, whatever it is. Anyway, so
I've never been to jail before. I don't know.
I don't know, never been to jail. So I literally see people coming in, like people bring drugs into jail. Jail does not help you with addiction.
That's what I've heard.
The question somebody asked me today, which actually was a good question, is if people need to want to get clean. I totally agree with that. People need oh, look who showed up. Hey, so people need to
That was the finding with the Switzerland model.
Yeah, of course. People need to have the first motivation to get clean has to be the individual. And if they aren't going to get, you know, if they don't have that need, it's never going to work. But then, so the question became, well, then if we put them in jail, they'll be forced to get clean. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that at all.
Because what they found is that in the Switzerland model, the hardcore users, they'd keep using until they addressed the thing that they were running away from, the thing that they were filling that void from with drugs. Until they addressed that, nothing else would work.
Right.
And that's why they spent so much money on the mental health and the therapy angle of it. And that's cost effectiveness. That's what they found was the most effective model. And these are people that it's Switzerland. They're going to go with the most cost-effective.
Hey, Lee's showed up. I don't think
switch over.
It can get into him, but well, I mean, it's good to have. Where's the third mic?
I have it attached.
Is it attached?
Yeah,
Cool.
it's already ready to go.
So yeah, it doesn't work. Sticking people in prison has never worked for drug addiction. And I actually, you know what? This is a perfect question to ask Lee. And Lee, is it okay if I talk about your past? I mean, why not? The whole world knows, and it's so important. Actually, this is important for anybody watching as well. So Lee, let's go right to the source. Lee, how long did you spend in prison?
20 years.
Lee spent 20 years incarcerated in a federal maximum penitentiary in the United States for cannabis. It is
triple max.
Okay, triple max for cannabis. That is it's insane. And so you were in there. From what you saw, did jail help anybody with addiction?
Well, the county jails where most
bring
people
this close. Bring
the
it
county
closer.
jails where most people go through, definitely not, because you see the same.
Can we move that?
Let me explain it better. I was in
these things. Yeah.
I was in the Don jail for 49 months, county jail, and I've seen more people return. And they're strung out on drugs. It's just out of this world, you know?
Yeah, so did it help them at all?
No.
For 20 years. What
No.
did you see?
No, it doesn't help them at all. If you want help, the first thing has got to be the person. You know, the person wants to do it. Like I have a nephew that's a pill popper. Okay? And nothing, they lie, they cheat, they steal, they do anything they can. But like I said, for him, my sister left him $150,000. He checked into a room, bought all the dope he could be, and stayed there until the money ran out.
Okay.
But you don't get help in prison unless you want help.
Right. So what do you think? Putting people in prison not for trafficking and violence. We're not talking trafficking and violence. I'm talking about single use, individual use.
No, you don't. They don't get straight going to prison.
That's right.
Okay, first thing off, they gotta wanna, and if you wanna take a course in prison, there are courses there to take. Are they gonna help you? No, not unless you really want them to.
Right.
But you got to continue it when you get out.
And does taking single use individuals, like let's say users of drugs who aren't trafficking, does taking them off the street and putting them in jail change the rates of drug use? Does it change violent crime rates? Does it change it? Of course it doesn't. It doesn't change any of that stuff. And so decriminalizing, so just yesterday there was all this, or a couple days within the last couple of weeks, there's this movement within Canada to decriminalize hardline drugs. That doesn't mean for individual use. It doesn't mean that somebody can traffic and get away with it. Those laws become harsher. Violent crimes become harsher. But if somebody is using their drug on their own, and let's say you get caught with 2 grams of fentanyl on your own, your self-use, you're not arrested. Maybe you have to create a whole a program around it, but you're not sent to jail. And I think it's a great idea. I think it's the first.
I do too. I think helping people at the beginning, but I think also there's a line to draw when you help people. Like when a person's getting helped 20 times in 2-3 years, no, he is addicted. He's the one that wants it. You have to he has to want to get help and really go get help, or you don't get help.
Oh no, I get it. But does that mean you just keep sticking them in prison?
Well,
if he's in,
I think there has to be some kind of discipline at some point, just because.
For what? What are you disciplining?
There's a certain type of character that's what works on them, right? There's a lot of people, but again, I think as long as the money gets redirected into mental health and to paying for therapy for a lot of these people, that's what I've seen to be the only thing that actually works in making them better, right?
So you need to set up an infrastructure. So decriminalizing is one of the steps.
To a certain point, yeah.
It's the step of society didn't get anywhere except worse by outlawing
all of
drugs.
The money that we take towards fighting drugs, we should take that and stick it towards therapy.
Agree. So can we agree that that criminalizing drugs has worsened society? Because it did.
100%.
Yeah.
So now that we agree with that, we have to figure out an infrastructure to help them. Decriminalizing it is one thing, but without the intention of doing something different, I mean, it's just not. It's not going to serve its purpose. You're just going to have more addicts, that aren't in jail. Now they're on the street. How are we going to help these people? That's the question.
I think we aggressively have to cut down on the supply, maybe as well. I mean, I don't know if that's like. Do we make drugs more readily available then too?
No. Do we make drugs? No. So there is a limit. I don't think we should.
No. But just around that question.
No, I read that. I read this other article, and it was sent to me a whole bunch of times yesterday. Yeah. And the article basically said you should feel empowered that you're using, your hardline drugs appropriately or something like that. That was like you should feel empowered that you're using your drugs appropriately. I can't remember the exact title of the article. If somebody on Instagram can just tell it to me, I can.
Sounds like woke empowerment.
Can you see? Are people asking questions? By the way, if you guys have questions, Lucas.
I am seeing them come.
All right, so then ask them when we get there. And keep a couple. Do you want to write something down? If you need to write, we can answer people's questions.
Take notes on them.
So I do not think that we should empower people to feel comfortable using hardline drugs. I don't think we need to do that.
Because then it's kind of encouraging.
That's encouraging. Yeah, it's current saying it's okay to use hardline drugs. I don't think it's okay from a mental health perspective, not from a illegal
Do you
perspective.
think the government should provide the drugs? Because that's what they did in Switzerland.
No.
They provided.
I don't think we should be providing drugs.
Okay.
No.
I think we could provide safe injection sites. The question is, does safe injection sites work? If you have the infrastructure around it, I think just providing somebody a safe site to come and inject doesn't work. You have to have an infrastructure around it in order for it to work. Here's the site, here's the counselor, here's the therapy, here's the people to talk to. Otherwise, if you need a safe you could go use your drugs. You don't need the site. The site has to come with a process.
Purpose, yeah.
Well,
a purpose.
listen, there's a lot of things around that we have to fix first, because most of the drug addicts are real criminals.
That's not true.
I don't know. Yeah.
Oh
I don't
yeah,
know.
that's true.
No, that's
How
not
do they
true.
get
Maybe
their-
the traffickers.
How do they get
I disagree
their,
with you, Lee.
Okay, hold it. Let me
Okay,
finish.
okay, sorry.
And then disagree.
Okay.
How do they get their money to keep buying these drugs? They commit crimes.
I think the
So-
addicts turn into criminals by necessity.
That's
kind of
correct.
thing,
So here's I'll give you an example. And this is what's happened with hardline drugs in general in places like Portugal and Netherlands. Would you, so people used to say that cannabis was a gateway drug. Do you believe cannabis is a gateway drug? No. Right? You can't, right? But if you look at the data, people that use cannabis, so let's say, or hardline drug users, the 4% of the population, most of those hardline drug users also use cannabis. So this is where they got the data from. So if all hardline drug users use cannabis, therefore cannabis is a gateway drug. Does that argument make sense?
That's the
No,
flawed
because they
art.
Of course it doesn't. Of course it doesn't.
It was designed
100%
to,
not.
yeah.
It doesn't, because that's called selection bias. If I look at 4% of the population and look at how many people use cannabis, the percentages make no sense.
Yeah.
If 50% of your population uses cannabis, how many of those people are actually hardline drug users? Well, you're going to have less than 4%.
What's the percentage
So,
that smokes marijuana now?
well, it's like 52%.
Yeah,
it's
pretty high.
whatever, but only 4% of the population. So that's called selection bias. The reason why I think it's a problem and why you would say the career criminal is, or the hardline drug user is a career criminal, is because where do they have to go to get their illicit drugs?
They have to steal.
Well, no, they have to go to a drug dealer in a small corner, and it makes it fucking impossible, who jacks up prices, makes all these things crazy.
Yeah.
And so these people then become criminals from being in that environment. So if we remove that environment and we provide an environment, you're going to, and we've seen this in Portugal, now pretty much every
That's what
single
happened in Switzerland.
So
in
what-
Switzerland.
So what are you saying? Give them all the drugs they want?
No, don't give them the drugs.
But that's what happened in Switzerland. So the government provided the drugs. That's what reduced the crime, right? Because they didn't have to go out and commit crimes to get the
Exactly.
drugs. Yeah.
So
The worst thing about any addiction, gambling, anything, it's the criminal acts you have to go to keep getting the money.
you do raise a good point.
Yeah.
Hey, I was in. I won't use names, but I was
No
in,
names.
I was in with guys that, believe me, I was in the Don jail for 49 months fighting extradition to the United States. I seen one guy come back over 20 times. He would leave 230, 240 pounds. He would come back in 120.
Holy shit.
Really?
But 20 times in 4.5 years is too much. And I mean, he would finish his 3 months, his 9 months, his 6 months. And it's all stealing to keep going.
Really? So that is a part of it. So how do you deal with that part then?
Well, when you got guys on them hard drugs, when you got guys on really hard drugs, it costs a lot of money to keep going.
Yeah.
Yes.
It costs a lot of money. to keep
$100 a
going.
day.
At least.
Oh,
At
that's
least.
for low.
Yeah.
Like a gram of Coke is like 110, 130.
Good thing I don't know much about hardline drugs. Thank you. You all now know that I am not doing
but
hardline drugs.
I'm
I
just
would
saying,
assume
Even
$100 a
pills.
day.
Pills is even worse. Like
I have never dealt hardline drugs in my life. I only ever dealt marijuana.
Yeah, same.
And
Thank you very much for
No.
saying that.
no, but
I'm saying
I
that,
did. But it was still wrong because it was illegal.
Right.
But the drug should never have been illegal because
In the first place.
You
It's our
weren't destroying
body.
people's lives with weed, though. That's the thing. It's like it's not the same thing that you're selling oxys on the corner,
Well-
and you know that.
Well,
you're,
we're learning. Look at
yeah.
it's part the government's fault from the beginning for not really learning about marijuana. Or did they learn and hide
Cannabis.
it from us?
Well, of course they learned. It's been around for so long. People have learned. We know that putting people in prison for it doesn't work and it breaks families. We know that putting people in prison takes away their career opportunities. We know putting people in prison puts a stigma around them trying to get a job when they get out.
So,
we know, yeah.
So I agree with you. Should we be putting drug users in prison? No.
No. But the dealers, yes.
Should, but okay, the dealers definitely. But why not just decriminalize it all and let the chips fall where they fall. Because I'm going to tell you,
I mean, it's not a bad idea.
when a guy has a bag of cocaine, hey, I'm not saying a guy comes down the street, he's got 20 keys of coke, he's not going. Sure, he's going to prison. He has no right to have that. But I mean, the guy that's out there, when you decriminalize it and there's no money in it, nobody wants to do it.
Yeah, it takes away the incentive.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's decreased. Crime rates have decreased. Violent crime rates have decreased. As soon as the police aren't involved, violent crime rates decrease. All of that decreases when you take out the legislative aspect of it.
Cash.
Right. Like right now, I was just reading, the Netherlands, you can buy a gram of cannabis for $1. Government.
Yeah, and you could buy them here for $1 too.
Well, yeah,
You can buy them here for 50
buy in
cents
bulk, yeah.
because you can buy a pound of weed now for $250.
Yeah, it's true.
And what's that? There's 400 and something grams. That's 50 cents a gram.
Drug math.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just saying.
Yeah, that's true.
But we got big problems with crack cocaine.
Yes,
Like
we
the
have bigger
people that-
problems with
With pills,
opioids.
with
Look at
opioids,
the
yeah.
people that deal crack cocaine. What's that? That
Oxycontin.
yeah, OxyContin.
It's a big one.
The OxyContin. Hey, a lot of guys ain't gonna like this, but them son of a bitches should be put after their second and third
The
time.
people that
Question.
sell-
They should
If there's
be
a
put
question,
they should
feel-
be put away.
The people that sell fentanyl for sure, like So do you agree with the safe injection site, but not SOS programs? What are your thoughts on SOS programs?
So it's interesting. I am pro safe injection sites.
First of all, what's an SOS?
So long as they have infrastructure around them to provide appropriate resources for people to get the help they need at the same time.
So having
If
somebody
it's-
on site, somebody.
So right, which is similar to what I believe in SOS is, right?
is an SOS
that I
program?
think that's like
But how many chances do we give them before we say they're never
okay,
gonna straighten out?
right. So, but is that a legal issue? That's my whole question. Is it a legal issue or is it a mental health issue to be dealt with in medicine?
Well, it doesn't become illegal.
Violence is the problem. If
Yeah.
you're worried about violence, deal with the violence. Deal with the robbery. Deal with that stuff. But if you
comes
create
with it a lot of the time, though, right? If you have a repeat offender, chances are it's going to get violent at a certain point. No,
Certain drugs, yes.
that's what I mean. It's kind of like
so yes and no. If it's illegal and they have to go searching for it, outrageous prices and all this other stuff. Not only that, opioid overdoses go up tremendously. Like I always know as a coroner, I always know, and this is a really crazy point. I always know when there's a dealer in town. I always know when there is a bad
There's a pattern.
batch of shit. Fentanyl or opioid or cocaine going around, because there's always going to be multiple deaths that day in a certain district, in a certain area, and they're all crumpled with each other. They're all like within a certain area, and you know when that's happening. There has to be a way around that. We understand 4% of our society are going to do hardline drugs. It's not good. They're going to do no matter what. Whether we make it legal or illegal or do anything to it, people are still going to do it.
The only way of
so we
doing
have
that
to find a way around.
But that would be government testing or government involved in some way, right?
SOS, I'm not sure I know what SOS sites are.
It's there's certain drugs that are just tear your family, yourself,
They tear them all. So that's a great question.
everybody apart.
So
Everybody.
if we went into the science, if we go into the science of opioids in general, why do people come to narcotics and the whole science of addiction? We can go to people like Gabor Mate and look at childhood trauma, or we can go to people like Judy Holland and they have this sense of disconnection. I like a combination
It's
of two.
pain, trauma of some
pain,
kind, yeah.
trauma, and they're trying to feel connected,
void, yeah.
right? They're trying to feel connected to their happy drugs like oxytocin and dopamine. These are the happy drugs that people have. have. And if people have a lack of those chemically, they try to find them from external sources, right? When we get together and we chat and we have a good time like most people do, that releases oxytocin and dopamine. That releases those happy drugs and you feel good. Some people that have depression and people that are recluse and people that have anxiety and stay at home, they have an absolute need for those things because we all do. We're a social creature.
Yeah.
They don't have them. How do they get them? They turn to things like opioids. Opioids give them that false sense of connection. They feel good and comfortable when they have it, so they look for that drug because it gives it to them. But instead of going outwards, which was what we do, and become social, and which is a protector, being social is is a protector against suicidality, criminality, and all of those things. They turn recluse because opioids bring you inside yourself and you become even more recluse. Narcotics bring you that way. So those people that have that, they find this false sense of hope through opioids, and they become recluse. Then they become suicidal. Then they become depressed, and I guess depression first, then become suicidal, and then
it also
everything
the
sort
physical,
of comes
the
from
physical
that.
Part of
That's
the addiction too, right?
That is the physical. I'm sort of combining both together, right? Because they have a lack of dopamine, a lack of oxytocin. Those are your happy drugs that are going to bring you those good feelings. Now, opioids, yes, work on receptors that have a withdrawal mechanism to it, right? They have a tolerance and withdrawal. And these are the things that define, defining addiction is complicated. What defines addiction? We could go through the DSM-5.
But it's like the difference between like doing drugs recreationally on the weekend and then getting off of it fine versus some people do opioids and it's like right away the withdrawals are so extreme that it is them getting their fix.
So there's a difference between dependence and addiction, abuse and addiction, right? Addiction it has to involve your social circle. It has to somehow
disrupt your
social life. You can be dependent, and that's why we have methadone clinics and all these things. I'm not an abstinence person. I don't believe in that abstinence works because people will always go back or find another mechanism as an outlet. We have to deal with it.
Do you believe in methadone clinics?
I think they help in a certain percentage of people, but again, they do not work in a vacuum.
So here's a question.
I don't think they work in a vacuum.
As a doctor, here's a question that a lot of doctors
but I think they do work
can't answer
in a holistic approach.
You get them on that. How do you get them off of it?
Right. So the question is, what is the goal? What is the outcome? Is the outcome to get you off of the narcotic altogether or to make you functional, no longer an addict, but a dependent?
Because I've heard people being on it for like 15 years.
For their whole lives.
Yeah, that's craziness.
Right. But for some people, they can function. I think the goal is to be able to function in your daily life with nothing.
If they can function, to be honest.
They do. I know a lot of people that carry jobs that have high level, even C-suite jobs that are on methadone. But the question is, what is the goal? Is the goal to come right off of it? Or is the goal to no longer be an addict but dependent?
So why does the public have to suffer with the expense of these people? Not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 4.
20 times from what you've seen.
Yeah, it just keeps going on.
I think when it just comes down to the expense.
To me, they're a menace to society. And when you bring someone back in 4 years 20 times in front of the court, you know what kind of money that costs?
I don't disagree. But the question is,
it's the same thing as somebody walking into the hospital every night saying he's sick, but he's not sick.
Right. Well, we get that all the time.
Sure.
So, then the question becomes,
they're looking for friends.
Right. So the question,
they come to the hospital.
Like when you're gonna find me, you yell at me
but
like
if it's just
the other
what's
day.
cheapest, the Switzerland model proves that, though, right?
Right.
It's the best way to get them to help decriminalize, put all the money towards mental health and therapy, and that's the best way of approaching it.
We don't help enough mental health people.
You've got to create infrastructure for helping the underlying cause.
But you still have to incarcerate those that are going to be violent. That's the other flip side of it.
Correct. Right. You do. But the good news is, from the data that we have, that we know, laxer laws equals less criminality equals less violent acts.
Yeah, in
this is
general.
one would think it's contrary to our intuition, but that's what happened throughout. I mean, that's what the UB study showed. That's what Portugal showed, Netherlands showed,
It's just
Switzerland showed,
broken
all of them.
people trying to fix broken people at the root cause, right?
Right.
It's
And the only thing that incarceration does, it puts money into pockets of institutions.
Yeah. I mean, it
And
keeps
breaks
violent
families.
offenders away too, right?
Well,
It
there's
does,
some-
violent offenders.
Because
Does it?
what-
But
because-
it doesn't decrease violence? No, that's what I'm trying to say.
Well,
We need-
It doesn't decrease violence.
We need prisons.
Violence,
In some cases, yeah, but
it
I
does.
mean,
We do need
when
prisons.
when they started releasing
But not
a
for
lot
drugs.
of prisoners in California, there were so many stories of people that were in for drugs that got out and shot their girlfriends as soon as they got out. That happens. That has happened.
that happened. Yeah, but they're going. They still went to prison and came out and shot their family,
But they were in there for drug offenses, right?
and they
got
still
lot
killed
out.
their. Right. So did it help them?
Well, they
It-
came out and shot like
Right.
somebody
So
after.
did going to
So
prison
they didn't
help
do
them?
the right program.
So did
That's-
prison help them?
No.
Right.
No,
period.
Yeah.
So right. So that's my point. The point
Yeah.
is it doesn't work.
Yeah.
What does work though is the less you arrest somebody. Like I mean, you look at certain states in the United States.
Yeah.
Drug violence went down nearly 50% as soon as you stop putting people in prison.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but the
Well, there's, back 10 years ago, 15 years, they'd be throwing a guy in jail for a joint.
yeah.
but that's what I'm saying. They still do that.
Well, they shouldn't
In
be doing
some
it here.
states,
It's
they,
legal.
Not in Canada.
But you're right.
In some
They-
states, it's crazy. Like I remember when I was living in California, Nevada was so strict on it, so that like we had to really, really make a point of like as soon as we cross over, we don't have anything like lying around.
Worst for me is going to Mexico. I
So
got
look
to
at
hide.
look at what we
Feel
did.
free to find
look at
another
what
question.
they did with the marijuana. Now it's legal to go to the store and buy a joint.
Yes.
Okay, so why doesn't the government get smart? Right? And why doesn't the government go in and give them their cocaine in the store?
Well, so this is
they still got to buy it.
Yeah.
They still got to buy it. But why don't they go in and give it to them in the store?
So this
So
is
that's what
this is what he's
Switzerland
saying.
did, yeah.
That's what some countries have done, and their
And that's
rates.
what the SOS site is. So safe
right.
opioid supply.
Oh, safe.
So it's,
that's
so it's the
okay.
government,
Right.
I'm guessing, giving it out. Yeah.
I think I knew that. Sorry,
Everything
slipped
comes
my mind.
back to that,
So
though, right? If
I-
you want a safe drug supply, then how else do you do it? How else do you ensure that, the drugs are safe? Because that's a big part of this, right?
The question, so go at that, and it clicked in my head now. Sorry, I couldn't remember it. I don't know. My brain was somewhere else. So long as there is infrastructure around an SOS site, I actually think it's probably better. But there has to be, you have to sign a contract. It has to be it doesn't exist in a vacuum. If I can just walk up to a corner store and start buying my drugs, I don't think drugs. So remember, I have an idea of wellness promotion, right? This is the idea. I'm not a prohibitionist. I'm not against drugs for like whatever, but I am against people that are harming themselves through using whatever mechanism of addiction that they have. So if we're going to provide people with the opportunity to get their narcotics or safe injection sites, either one, there has to be an institution, well, let's not use institution, an infrastructure around it so that we can help them as well.
Yeah.
That's I mean, what the Switzerland model found is that they ended up on giving as much drugs as the patient wanted, but they had to do them under the supervision of somebody that was at the space, and they had to do them there. That was the whole deal, and that's what they found worked. And they'd tried everything, right? Because like I said, it wasn't what they arrived on first, because they wanted to incarcerate people and they went the hardline model first, and they just found that it wasn't cost effective to do it. So they were like, what's the most cost effective way of doing it? That's what they ended up on.
Yeah.
And it worked. Like,
Well, it's worked everywhere that they've done it.
Yeah.
And I think what Pierre said yesterday, which like brought this whole discussion on, was that decriminalizing narcotics is the least compassionate thing you can do. I think that's a very naive and ultra conservative way of looking at things, and he's not seeing not only the bigger picture. He's not looking at what affects other people. He's looking at a very self-centric perspective. And
He's showing
and
he's a career politician, I think.
yeah, well, he's
that-
pandering. He's
Yeah,
pandering
that's
to
what I
his
going
crowd.
off polls, right?
Yeah,
That's
he's
it.
going off polls and not off reality. A lot of people don't know because it's not intuitive
Yeah.
to think that decriminalizing will decrease crime rates. It's counterintuitive, and you actually have to go look at the data to know the answer. It's like,
People don't wanna
I
hear
almost
that.
brought in your vaccines.
People don't
but I
want to
didn't.
hear that almost. That's why. It's
No, they
kind of
don't.
Like,
They don't. I had a patient. It's got me so mad the other day. I had a family member tell me that why does the drug addict outside get a bed before my family member? Why are you treating them? They don't deserve to be treated. This person, and they're yelling at me. They're yelling at me, and they're get me out of this place. I want to leave here. You guys don't care about my family member. You care about the drug addict down the street more than you care about my family member. My answer was, you're all human, right? And did not work for that person. But that's how people think. That was a Karen, for sure. Like the whole interaction was like just absolutely awful.
Most guys that are heavy drug users are very selfish too.
They are, for sure they are.
Like half of them, their brains are gone. They
Yeah.
do it so much.
From what
yeah.
you see, certainly.
It's
I've
weird.
seen it all.
Yeah, of course.
It's
That's
weird
what I
though
mean.
because like I contrast it with like living in California, being in the tech world. Everybody's on Adderall. Everybody's on drugs. Like everybody.
What's your drug?
But that's the thing,
that's-
right? It's that
okay,
like
so that's a
these
new
are some of
question.
the most high functioning people on the planet that are like huge salaries, that are family people, but are doing like a lot of Adderall
It's
to
not
the
a
point where it's high. You're
So,
getting
but
high
it's
off
not
it.
affecting their daily.
No, I mean it's an enhancer, right? I mean it just makes them work more focused in a lot of ways.
Some drugs
It works.
are better for people. Some,
Yeah.
but again,
people
is
need
that
it.
healthy?
Yeah.
Is
Stay
that healthy?
focused.
Adderall on its. We talk about attention deficit
When you're
drugs.
expected to work 20-hour days and you're at a startup and you're like, that's the culture, right? It's
Yeah.
It invites that, but that's perfectly acceptable. Nobody is telling anybody at Facebook that like, hey, you shouldn't be doing this and it's wrong.
Well,
and,
I think we are, but people. I go around
there's
telling
no
people
pushback on and that
Yeah,
here
but-
at all.
for other.
In the tech world, in the university
I don't know the
world,
tech world, to be
in the
honest.
university
Like,
world, it's so normalized that it's totally fine to do that, right?
I don't
That's
think
what I'm
so.
saying.
I
It's
mean,
like-
I think a lot of people do it. Listen, as a drug, I didn't use it. As a prescription, I was prescribed Concerta pretty much my whole life.
It's like
Concerta is for attention deficit. It's a dopamine agonist. Anyway, keeps dopamine hanging around longer. So people that have attention deficit disorder use it. I'm not pro drug use at all if you don't need it. But there are certain drugs, like, for example, Concerta or Ritalin, which is the same thing, it's just long-acting Ritalin, literally got me. I was pretty much a high school dropout. I was in 11th grade, my third year of high school, and at that time we had to have 30 credits to graduate. I had 8 credits. I had I wasn't a bad kid. I was, every time I was captain of our rugby team, captain of the baseball team, captain of all these teams, super athletic until I'd get thrown off for not having good enough grades or whatever. And all my whole life, I went to these doctors that just said, he's just a piece of shit kid that's not going to make it anywhere. He's never going to, he'll never graduate. In 4th grade, you can ask my pop. 4th grade, I was told I'm never going to make
And
it.
what did you call them? Piece of shit doctor?
No, did I say that?
That's pretty sure what he said.
Did I didn't say that.
I'm
Did I
not
say
right,
that?
am I?
Did I?
just saying
Okay,
so.
can we not fact check that? Did I say that?
Yeah, piece of shit.
Yep.
Don't open the door for me.
Did I say that?
Yeah, you really can't get mad at Lee next time for
A
he
piece
says
of
it.
shit doctor, and the pieces of shit doctor kept.
I didn't. Can we fact check?
You totally said
Can
that.
we rewind and
Totally
fact check?
said that.
Did I say that?
Yeah.
So that's
I
all
meant to
right.
say teachers.
And there is a lot
No,
of
but it's-
pieces of shit doctors, and there's
Yeah.
there's a lot of pieces of shit policemen,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of liars, and they shouldn't be liars.
Yeah.
Do your job. We pay you to do your job.
We put a lot of trust in those people. Yeah.
And hey, I agree. Doctors get a lot of things thrown at them, but doctors. I just would love
It's interesting
to go,
that I said that.
I would know, but you said it because in the back of your head, it's true.
Yeah, because you were talking about doctors that
And there is.
overprescribe drugs to
hey,
kids.
it's not everybody.
Right.
It's not everybody, but it's
I think
a
that's
lot
a fair
of
thing to say.
there's a lot of
Interesting.
problems with
Yeah.
the way people get diagnosed too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, what I would say
You know?
though, so back to what I was saying, I was saying piece of shit teachers, and because they were absolutely like the worst possible teachers. I don't know back then. I could have also been me because whatever. They just basically wrote me off and said I was the worst kid. Like it was just because I couldn't sit in class and I never went to
I had the
class.
exact same
I was
thinking,
socially great. I had great friends. It was awesome. I was a
School's
happy
not
kid. I never had
structured for-
depression. I
Yeah,
didn't
but you
suffer.
were an outgoing guy.
Right.
So you were a guy's guy, a girl's
Yeah.
girl. You like to be around the people, then you like to be the center of attraction, talking
Right.
always. You're not the shy guy in the corner,
No.
which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Right, but
It's just school's not set up for
school
that,
wasn't
yeah.
set for me. And finally, though, I went to
I'm
one
the same as you.
doctor.
I couldn't go to
Did
school.
you go to Montessori schools? No, eh?
No, I went to there was not a school left in
You
Toronto
tried
that would take
Montessori
me.
and it didn't work. That model didn't
They
work.
didn't have Montessori when I
Because I
was.
feel like that
You
would,
can tell
No.
by his attitude as he gets older too. Why? Right?
Yeah, that's true. too.
Fuck off! You guys are assholes.
No, but there's something I'm stuck on, doctor.
We've gone off topic.
No.
Here we go.
Doctors, when you go see a doctor and he's a specialist on that, okay, let's say for hard use drugs. When you go see that doctor and he's supposed to be like, he's really got to be into it with you.
He does, and it's hard. So I'm gonna skip my backstory because it was every time I say something, Lee's just gonna
No,
go
no,
off.
I'm not gonna. But I just said, I'm glad you said that because I've said that on the show. And
Yeah, I know, I
I've
kept
got a
thinking-
lot of trouble,
Can-
and I've even got phone calls from you later.
Yeah.
And I've done Instagrams where I said that.
Yeah,
and,
you're
and
right.
What do I get back?
There you go.
You're right. You know, it's interesting. Now I have to think
validates it
about.
a little bit.
I may have just
Listen.
changed my perspective a little, Mr. Lee.
There you go.
I'll just tell you one little thing about doctors and nurses what they shouldn't do.
What's someone asking?
So I helped a lady. I'm helping a lady with cancer from Barrie, and the stories she told me, they're mean to her. Look you can't get better. Go home and die.
Right.
You know, you can't. And then she goes and fights the college, argues with the college, and the college says, "Is it the operation you want? You think it can help you? Yes. Are you willing to sign the paper to say you might lose your life? Yes." And she goes in, she gets this operation that these doctors said, we're not doing. She's got a football tumor as big as this in her stomach. So they go in, they take it out. She's been here a year now.
Right.
And
Is that
she's got,
So-
and she looks
so back
good,
to doctors.
and she's fighting. But
A lot of them.
Is that a byproduct of them being overworked? and
Right.
just
So
being
you
like-
brought up a good point before, and so yes, I have to reevaluate. There are shitty doctors
Yeah.
that just don't care.
I mean, they're
But
human,
a lot
right,
of
at the end of the
doctors,
day.
they're human. They're overworked. They're tired. They're exhausted. They're seeing thousands of people. The system is broken. All this kind of stuff.
what
but there's
system, Ira? Like
What do you mean?
I'm confused.
our medical system.
Like, okay,
Do we have a
that-
medical system?
But isn't all of our system broken?
That's what I said. Our medical system
Yeah.
is broken.
But
It's designed
When
to-
does it change? The doctors have to change it.
No, the doctors can't change it
Why can't?
because it's
Oh, I
government
disagree
regulated.
there. I think the doctors have to be the ones to
Are you
change it.
telling
We can't.
me that,
we're
are you
government
telling me-
regulated.
Doctors.
Big
I think that's how
pharma's.
It's not big pharma. The way we get remunerated has nothing to do with us. It's a public system. We're public servants. I get paid by the government. The
But
government
there's
decides.
a union. There's
Doctors
coalitions.
aren't a union.
No.
There's no doctors.
No, we
union?
have an association. We're not allowed to unionize. We don't have any of that stuff.
But there's
We
nurses association.
No, we have nurses have this. Nurses are different.
Nurses are
But
different than
They
doctors.
have the ONA,
Well,
but
yeah.
we don't have a
But isn't
union.
that
They
how
have
it
a
would
union.
change?
We don't.
Isn't that how it would change a
We
coalition
can't
of doctors?
unionize. We're essential service that's not allowed to do that. We have an association that can advocate for us, but then we have to go to court. It's a whole to do.
So when you go to school, what do you really learn? Do you learn?
What do you mean? You come to the emergency department with a broken head, I'll fix it.
Okay.
I learned that.
But
You have diabetes, we can help you
if
with
somebody tells you, hey, I don't want you doing what you learned anymore, Doesn't that play a role in?
Well, it does. So that's so yes. So you have
And that's what's
confirmation.
going on nowadays, right?
So, right. So there's science always progresses. There are basic principles of science, which we fundamentally adhere to, and then evidence continuously changes. That thing finally went off. Evidence continuously changes within the medical field, and you're supposed to adapt with it. However, some people get stuck.
But not now anymore. Not anymore.
But somehow now we can't have that discussion. And I don't disagree. It is really bad. Like there are a lot of things happening in the world post-COVID, pre-COVID, or within peri-COVID, let's call peri-COVID, that don't allow the questioning of the narrative or questioning of the evidence.
And my fear is that that's a forever thing, because you saw how they're doing monkeypox already. And it's that same model.
So, but then nothing is forever. I agree with that.
It goes one way and it changes.
What did Pfizer's CEO say at the
the
World
question
Economic
is,
Forum?
who are the people that are analyzing the data, and where should that discussion be had?
Do you know what he said? The CEO of Pfizer?
We're back. We're talking about opioids.
No. It's the CEO of Pfizer.
Okay, let's talk about Purdue.
So,
They don't exist anymore, so I can do it. Is
Yeah.
anybody ask? Is there anything I need to answer?
so.
Okay, fine.
if there's anything like opioids are the hard drugs are real bad.
Yes.
We know that. So aren't you guys going to work on a way of getting something to try to help that?
Well, we're trying. So that's the whole thing. This guy started with decriminalization. In order to decriminalize, you have to have an infrastructure. And I keep going back to that. Without the infrastructure, I'm not sure what's really actually going to change.
Without the therapy and infrastructure, it doesn't matter. I don't
No,
think.
I don't think so either.
I think you know a little bit about this. Let me ask you this.
Now, I use different drugs. We use cannabis to help people.
But I'm just saying, how about a guy that's using cannabis, that's starting to get violent, starting to want to hurt himself? I think he's over smoking probably, and he's burning himself out. And he was like that for a long, long time. And then he started doing some of my cannabis pills. He completely changed.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't spoken to him. I'm sure there's multifactorial issues, but yes, we know your pill does stuff. We know these things happen. That's why I'm putting it to the test. That's why we're going to be researching these things. There are other non-pharmaceutical natural therapies. The question is, do you just change one for the other? Do you just say, oh, well, you were using all these drugs, now use this drug? This drug's healthier, so then it's okay to be on this forever. Question, have we dealt with the underlying issue?
Yeah, that's a
Right.
big part of it.
That's right. You gotta get down to. But I mean, to get them off, to get to deal.
Great
that,
idea.
We got to find something.
We have things. We have cannabis. I agree with you,
To
Lee.
like smooth off the edge kind of thing as they're doing it.
And that's why there are synergistic medicines like your medicine, Lee, and like cannabis in general, both THC and CBD, whatever it is, all the cannabinoids, they work on the same receptors that opioids work on.
I think for reducing opioid use for sure.
And for sure they do.
The worst thing happens to me in the city when I drive down Barton Street.
Yeah.
I see a little girl. And when I say a little girl, I mean 20, 22, 23-year-old. That's a little girl.
These over 60,
It's
just
tragic.
pointing that out.
No.
I'm 66.
I see it every day, man.
But I mean, I see that little girl, and then I see her 3 months later.
Yeah.
And you know what? I've turned my head and had tears running down my eyes because I can't believe that some human being would push that on and watch that some guy's little daughter go from this to like gone.
That's when
But
it's
I'm
hard
just
to-
saying, that's the kind of people we got to put away.
Yeah, the drug dealers.
No, we don't have to. Who?
Not the girl.
Oh.
The guys that are
the drug
doing it.
dealers.
Yes,
the
I
drug
agree.
Because if you
dealers that
see
are-
the guy that's running them,
Yes.
he's got his pocket full, he's got a
course
nice
he does.
car,
Yeah.
and he's pushing them out to do all kinds of
like the
sexual things.
the drug dealers that are running trap houses, like those are the people that kind of like I think that should
They
Been
be
to
belong
a
in
lot
prison.
of.
Yeah.
They belong
I've
in
been to a
prison
lot of
for
trap.
20 years.
I agree.
Because 20 years you start to think.
Because
Yeah,
there's no
I
excusing that,
agree.
right? It's not just you're a user and this has fallen upon you. You're profiting off of the suffering of other
That's
people
right.
at that point. Right?
I've been to a lot of trap houses, and they are absolute as the coroner, and
I can't
and it
imagine.
is
It's terrible.
It's terrible.
And it's sad.
I've known ones that
Hey,
have kids there that have like younger kids. It's
It's sad. It's sad to watch at the beginning. You know, them hard drugs that crystal meth and that, it's hard to watch that at the beginning, but it's when they're dead, they're dead. It still tears the family apart.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's, and a lot of
you
it.
know the guys that do it, they got no harm of grabbing the next guy's daughter.
Oh, that's right.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, they just look them at, it's a commodity, right? It's a commodity.
And, you know, they're nice to him. They play with him. They go, they take him dancing.
Oh,
they
it's
go
predatory
and the
as
next
fuck.
thing you know, want to sleep with my friend?
Oh,
Yeah.
it's
Come on, he's going to give us $500. We can get some more drugs. Like, it's terrible.
It's predatory to the point where, like, I've heard of dealers that'll, like, sleep with a girl and while she's sleeping will, like, blow fentanyl in her, like, while she's sleeping just to get them hooked on it that way. Like, that's the level of predatory.
I'll be honest with you. They do it any way they can.
Yeah.
And because that girl to them is a bank account.
That's right. It's a commodity.
And then that girl to her family tears them apart.
Yeah.
So where is the justice? The justice is when you're playing with somebody else's family, expect to get what you're going to get.
Yeah. I had that happen one day.
Yeah, I
like,
agree with you.
One day that I first moved to Hamilton, I was walking towards the cotton factory down Barton, and there was a dad running after his girl who just got released from the hospital, and she was running back to their drug dealer, and the dad was trying to get her to stop, and I tried talking to her like halfway down the road, and it's
sad.
It's so fucking sad.
I mean, the
It's
other day,
brutal.
I see it all the time in Emerge. They I see it on all ends, which is why I got into cannabis
Especially on Barton Street.
in the first place. Hey, listen, it doesn't matter where I'm working. Every walk of life, whether you have a Gucci purse
There's addicts
or you
everywhere.
have a Value Village purse, you're gonna have the same problem when you get into the drugs.
Same
It
percentage
affects
of people
every
too,
walk.
yeah.
Well, you're
walk
not
of
going to have
life.
that Gucci purse because you're going to sell
Right,
it.
you're gonna say, right. That's what I mean. You're gonna have the Value Village, or you probably
But different
won't.
drugs for different class
Yeah,
systems of
there
people
are
too, right?
certainly, but addiction is addiction.
But you
and
must see them little girls come into the
I see it
hospital.
all, man. I
That
see
must
guys,
just-
girls, old,
As
young.
a father of children, you must just be tore apart.
Yeah, it's crazy, and you don't know what to
But
do.
you can't take it personally.
Well, you say no, and then they start yelling and screaming. You say yes, you've now contributed to
winning
their
'cause-
issue. You're the physician in the Emerge is in a really tough situation. You say no to the treatment of pain in an Emerge, and that's a call. Like, you can get in a lot of trouble. But where's the line of, is this person an addict, or is this person really in all this pain that they say that you can't quantify, because they come in and tell you they have a headache or they have a toothache or they have this. You can't see it. But you're assuming they're not lying to you, but most people will lie for drugs. We know that.
Yeah.
So it's just really hard. And that's why we have alternatives, and so you talked about earlier on, I guess on our last point before we go, Lee, you had great insights as well. And Lucas, thank you. You brought up 2 points. You brought the physiological issue, and then there's also the mental health issue. And both of those work, and there's therapies that work on different parts of those. I spoke about earlier on. First, I'll talk about like where psychedelics are going with this and addiction and why they help. And I think that goes to the Judy Holland issue, where she talks about the oxytocin, the feeling of connection, the feeling of worth, and the experience of having purpose, which comes from the release of oxytocin and dopamine and those things. And so psychedelics, psilocybin, magic mushrooms in general, help people feel connected, feel a more sense of oneness, and that sense of oneness releases those happy
like makes that connection
and right,
happen
it makes
again.
that neural connection. And once you have that neural connection, you're able to deal with your addiction and your underlying issues, which comes back to Gabor Mate.
Facilitates your brain's
Right,
connection.
you can facilitate those things, and so you can move through it. So that's where psilocybin is working in conjunction with intense therapy over a 6-week period of time. These people are done. On the other side, we also have cannabinoids and cannabis, and those work directly on receptors like dopamine. And because they can agonize the dopamine receptor, you can get that release of dopamine that you need as well. Not only that, cannabinoids also help you feel relaxed and able to deal with that trauma, that underlying trauma that people suffer. So there are alternatives that are safe for people to use. And I spoke about addiction. What are the addiction rates of cannabinoids and psilocybin? Well, they're the lowest on this. Gable in 2006 did a very good.
Can you get addicted to mushrooms? Really?
There's like a tiny addiction
I feel
rate.
like it's almost
You
impossible.
can't. Well, it's like maybe a 2%. It's tiny little
Just like the effect
percent
it has on
of-
your mental
of
state
it,
too. It's almost
addiction.
like anti-addiction, you know?
Yeah, exactly. So you can look at it. It's like next to nothing. Psilocybin, LSD, all those psychedelics, very, very low addiction rate. Cannabinoids have like a 4 to 6% addiction rate. Again, the addiction rates may not be physiologic, right? These can be people that use, like you said, people that are smoking too much, doing all this stuff. It's a ritualized addiction, right? And which comes from the regulation around it. People that are forced to use drugs in their favorite spot with their favorite bong in their only location under the covers where no one, they'll go back to that ritual every single day. That ritual becomes the habit. That habit becomes the addiction. So when you take away things, those barriers for people, you start noticing that those addiction rates decline. And that's what they've noticed in these places. Anyway, last thoughts there?
Yeah, we got a lot of work to do on that subject with especially with the public and the government and everybody else. It's, we got tremendous troubles in all countries with drugs.
What did you learn in, like, I really want to pick you never, even when I ask you about what you learned about being in jail, about drugs, you're like, give me a one sentence.
One time, what
do you see? I don't want one sentence. I want to understand.
And it helped me.
Okay.
For the first 8 years of prison, I blamed everybody but me. Everybody. I already had the 18 guys I was involved with, except my brother, how I was going to kill them all, how I was mad at them. And then one day I woke up and I said, hey, this is a me issue, not them. Yeah. I worked with the wrong people. I did the wrong. I didn't hurt nobody, but I worked with the wrong people. They talked. They made a little accident into a big accident, and it almost cost people their whole life in prison. And I know a couple guys that spent 30, 40 years over it in prison. They got 18 years. They didn't stop in jail. They were setting up deals in jail. Well, they got another 30 years for that.
So why do you think you came to that conclusion?
Well, I think once you're around, like in a triple max security, and everybody's doing 30, 40, 50, 100 years. Yeah. So I was with guys doing 150 years. And I was doing with the guys, they could have 400 million years. Because they're only going to do what they can anyways.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what I mean? So the real bottom line is you come to the conclusion, you start to think, hey, you know what? If I wasn't out buying that marijuana, I wouldn't be in this position.
Ultimately, that's an empowering thing, though, too, right? Is that it puts the onus on you, and then you can deal with it.
I always say it's from, and not everybody's in my situation, but most people, lack of education.
Can you bring the mic a little closer?
Lack of education, lack of proper family life. I watched my dad beat my mother up 5 times a week. People don't even know what my mother went through in life. They don't have a clue. When we used to have 3 feet of snow, my dad would throw her out in the snowbank, and I cried we had 7 kids. What could we do? It's like my mother said, where do I go with 7 little kids? I stay and take the abuse until I have the means to move. But, there is a time when you start to think and you put yourself into a situation where you're like, hey, this might be my fault.
But that's amazing, though. You broke that cycle too, though, right? I mean,
well,
that's a big thing.
I think I grew up. I think I got to the point where
you had enough self-awareness to realize that it was wrong and realize that you can have the power to not do that yourself.
Yeah.
That's a big thing.
And you know what? I quit that. I don't. Yeah. Now when I hear guys talk about a drug deal and that, I go to the other side. Or I go, hey, excuse me, I got to go to the washroom. And I go.
Yeah.
I've been with my wife before. She goes, where are we going? We just ordered food. I go, I don't want to be in this restaurant. Why? I don't like the people here. Yeah. They're all my old friends, and I don't want them, there's drinks coming to the table.
You don't want to put yourself in that environment.
I don't want to be in that situation anymore.
Yeah.
I want to be in a situation where I'm fully under control all the time, and I don't want to tell people when they come to my table, hey, do me a favor, fuck off.
Yeah, you just
Because
rather
you're
take
nothing but
yourself
trouble.
away from
Well,
You know.
yeah, I hear you.
And then, hey, and you have to do that yourself.
yeah.
And it goes to say for the same people out there that are sick on drugs and that, they have to grow up. Not bring other people into it. They have to grow up.
There's
I
a certain
think-
amount of self. You know,
I think
it
at
is-
the end of the day, the buck stops with the person.
yeah.
If the person doesn't,
you have
this
to
is-
want to get help. You
and
have
this
to,
is what I tell people when they come into clinic, what I've been telling them for the last 13 years, I've helped a lot of people off of narcotics
Sure.
collaboratively. I've even published it. Well, I did a 1,200 patient survey on it. And the first thing I tell people is, I'm not here to do it for you. I can't do that. If you're not willing to make that choice right now, nothing is going to change. I'm here to help you if you want help. If you don't want it, that's not my life. That's your fucking life.
Exactly.
Yep.
And
All
you
right.
know who's the worst guy is? Is the guy that sits there and lies to you that he wants help because he wants to get out of jail.
That's
Yeah.
But
that's
he
right.
really wants, he really wants help so he can go back doing his drugs and
I've seen
playing
that
this
too.
game.
You know, that actually bugs me so much because I call that secondary gain. When I started working in cannabis, and I see it with fucking clients and patients that come in and say, I need 50, 200 grams a day because I'm making extracts. No, you're going to sell your shit on the street.
Right.
I know what you're going to do with that, with your thing. That's secondary gain. You're taking advantage of a physician
dishonest,
so that
yeah.
whether it's to get out of jail or it's to go grow your own marijuana that you're going to go, or cannabis that you're going to go and sell.
Yeah.
That's the same thing in my mind, right? So you gotta. One is getting
there's
out of
all
jail.
kinds.
There are all kinds. So
That's what makes a world, really.
and it's really tough as a physician though, because
Yeah.
you're just trying to help somebody, and then if you don't help them, they fucking start yelling at you and complaining about
they're
you,
playing
Bad
a game.
reviews
and they're
shit.
playing a game.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a tough discussion. This was an awesome.
Yeah, it's good though.
Awesome discussion today. Thank you guys for
I think-
and Lee, thanks for showing up to your own house.
Wow. I'm not like the rest of you. I got to work. Eh?
Oh,
Yeah,
right.
hey,
Okay.
hey,
Yeah, I don't
hey,
work.
hey.
I have to work like.
Yeah.
You do work hard. No,
Hey,
you
I
You
think one
do.
good thing is, if everybody just stops, if they got a friend that's a problem, like a drug problem, or you see a little girl getting abused, I think you should stop.
Say something,
If
do
you know
something.
them at all and try to talk to them, try to take them with you, or get them. But if they go back and back and back to rehab and they come out and do the same thing,
Sometime you just
you
got to
can't
cut
help
it off.
them.
Yeah.
You got to say to them, "Hey,
You're on your own.
I love you, but you got to make your own decisions
Yeah.
because we can't do it no more."
Some people need tough love too, though. There's that.
Yeah.
There's that.
You for
I mean,
sure. You
know,
can't be there for everybody.
Hey.
That if somebody doesn't want to help themselves, you can't.
My sister died hiding her money in her bra when she went to sleep in her own house because of her children.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
And he's still out there. You know where he lives now? He's got a beautiful, beautiful park, Gage Park.
Yeah.
He lives under the tree.
Jesus.
And he goes to my mother, and my mother's 91, and he'll cry to her for $20. Nan, give me $20, please. $20. And he'll just go buy some drugs.
Yeah.
That's,
And it's sad. They
Very
don't care
sad.
about food. They don't
No.
care about food.
and I'm curious as
So
to
we
like,
have
how
to
do we
do
get
so-
through to people like that.
So
you know?
okay, so there are programs, like what's crazy? I know I'm trying to get it. We're trying to stop, but
Yeah,
there are interesting programs. Like there are programs here in Hamilton and they're free. Like, but then we were giving out. Well, wasn't me. They were giving out literally exchange. It was a cannabis,
Oh, yeah.
a cannabis for opioid exchange. We were talking
That's a
about
great
that.
idea.
They're giving in their narcotics and getting a joint to go and smoke a joint. It's a great idea. The cops stopped them back then. It's
crazy.
crazy. It was what was it called? The HELP program? I can't remember.
That was
Anyway,
the one with.
Hey, we all have our
Yeah.
problems. Look at the states.
So, of course we do. But here's what so just as a last thought, we end on a positive note. I think if we do anything, we have to, like you said, we have to engage the people we know, try to help the people that we love that are around us. I think we need the infrastructure in order to support these things. And honestly, I think maybe group therapy, like just group get-togethers with people who
That
are
helps.
addicted.
having
I think
powwows, having drum circles.
yeah, I
having
think
just,
that's
like,
great. I'd
just
love to
general-
start that out of Synergy again, like, and do that when we
Just
can
on
afford
a good
it.
note, I did 2,000 hours drug rehab in jail twice.
Really?
Yeah. So I heard,
2,000 hours. Okay.
so
Yeah,
each course is 1,000 hours.
Yeah. Okay.
Wow.
Sounds like a lot,
Yeah.
but when you're doing 20 years, it's nothing.
Well, I guess you got lots of time, right? Yeah,
But
yeah.
you know what? But I was in there for drugs.
Yeah.
So the course is offered to me. And when you say no, they go, oh, you don't want to help yourself. But when you get there and you mix with a bunch of people, all different walks of life,
Yeah.
black, white, Chinese, Mexican, Japanese, like all walks of life, you sit there and you listen to these stories.
It's got to be interesting as hell. Yeah.
No, it's,
Wait.
you know what? It's mind blowing.
Yeah.
Right.
Because you'll see a guy, I won't say color or nothing, but you'll see a guy get up and he'll say, my name's Tommy, and I killed my mother, my father, my grandmother, and my grandmother's friend, and I got $20. And I'm doing the rest of my born days in jail because I was an addict.
Wow.
But he needed that $20.
Right.
And that's how bad it really gets. And until you're in that atmosphere and you see it and you live it, you don't even know it.
It's hard to put yourself
Right.
in that headspace, but
You know, even judges should really
Spend a day listening to these
spend
people.
a week listening to but don't listen to them inside the room. Listen to them in the balcony where they can't see you.
Right.
when they're talking casually, kind
So
of thing.
they'll speak out the way they really want to speak.
Yeah.
Because you know what? People that do really bad things, they want to talk about it
Right.
because it's driving them crazy inside. You know what I mean?
They
People
need an
that don't
outlet.
do real bad things don't give a shit.
So we need so outlets, that's the key. So I mean, maybe we can start, maybe through the foundation, we do something like that as
Yeah.
well. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for listening. Again, it was not our usual
format.
but we had to hit this topic. Thanks, Lee, for your insights and everything you've seen, and thanks, Lucas, for being involved. All right, everybody, have an awesome day. Stay connected, stay together,
Don't
stay
forget,
positive.
Lee helps, guys.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Check out Lee Helps.
I'll put a link in the description below, actually.
Yeah, Lee helps and
New Era.
Lee helps _oil.
And
I don't
New
know
Era
about New
Biopharma.
Era. I'm not really worried about that. But Lee helps is very important.
Okay. Yeah,
No,
I'll put
New Era is great.
I'll put a link.
New
actually.
Era